Good morning, everyone. I am Tomás Torres, Director of the Water Division. I hope everyone's doing well and that you're staying healthy in mind and body. Thank you for joining us for the water session of the Tribal Conference. First, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that I am presenting today from the ancestral homeland of the Miwok, Yokut, Lisjan, Muwekma Ohlone people, who are the original inhabitants of what is today called Pleasant Hill, California, here in Contra Costa County. As a guest of the land, I am grateful for the land and for the opportunity to live here and to pay respects by acknowledging the ancestors, the elders, relatives of these lands, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First People. Thanks for joining the Water Division Director Update session. As always, in terms of introductions, since we are doing this a little bit differently this time, we are asking folks if you want to introduce yourselves and your organization in the chat box. We would really appreciate it. Thank you. I do want to thank my tribal clean water and drinking water teams, many of whom are on the line today, for really their hard work in ensuring that tribal funding and programmatic needs and challenges are always looked after and addressed as quickly as possible. So please continue to count on them and us for any support that you may need on all things water. So know that we're here to serve you and to assist tribes in whatever capacity we can moving forward. So why don't we begin in the next 15 minutes? So let me, I got to get the hang of the moving of the slides. Loretta, if you can please go to the next slide. So in the next 15 minutes, I will be covering the following 7 topics. We will have hopefully quite a bit of time afterwards to answer questions, concerns, or anything you'd like to talk about, even if it wasn't covered in the slides. We will be capturing questions and comments in the chat box. So if you have some, please put them in the chat box and we'll be sure to cover those once the presentation is done. So please type them in before you forget them. Next slide, please. I think for those of you who have come to the Water Division Director session in the past, you know that I've always said, because government-to-government consultation is a fundamental part of EPA's trust responsibility, we are trying really hard to get better at it. We're not perfect. We have developed a division-wide standard operating procedure to set expectations within the division on consistency, on how we engage with tribes, on how we consult, and what things we consult on with respect to our trust responsibility and any of the decisions and actions that we take that could possibly impact tribal interests. As I said before, we continue to learn along the way, but hopefully becoming better at it. And along the way, we're hopefully also developing better awareness of, opportunities to consult, things we need to be mindful of as we make decisions and take actions that may have some ramifications or some interests on tribal lands. On this slide, the hard to read paper on the left is a copy of the first page of our consultation SOP, Standard Operation Procedures, which we recently revised thanks to our Tribal Clean Water team. We've designated Loretta Venegas as our lead division consultation coordinator, and she is a resource to all of us in our water division. And you, as we talk about consultation issues, process questions, and really in our coordination with our sister divisions like the TIP division and others as well. So the table on the right provides the number of tribal consultations we have offered in the past year. And then prior to that, in FY20 and 21, and as you can see, a number of tribes have accepted offers. I really wanted to share this information. So number one, you're aware of our internal efforts to get better at consulting with tribes. And of course, there's always room for improvement. And number two, to get some feedback from you on your experience with our consultation process and any suggestions, any improvements that you may have where we can do better. So feel free to send us any feedback or any suggestions via Loretta Venegas or us directly. I think Loretta's email is right there on the slide. But we're trying to get better at it, and we're trying to be as mindful as we can on any and all decisions that we make that could have an effect or an impact on tribal interests. So I will continue to show trends as we go in future presentations. Next slide, please. So this is our fiscal year 21 water program funding. This is just a snapshot of all of the funding that was allocated to Region 9 tribes, which includes about $36 million to tribes with approved TAS for the various water programs. As you can see, about 60% of the funding is for infrastructure projects. And this year, we are happy that we were able to leverage an allocation from our border water infrastructure program for border tribal projects. And I think this is the first time in about 4 or 5 years, if I remember correctly. So we're really happy that we could do that. The remaining 40% of the funding is for the Clean Water 106, 319, the multi-purpose, and the PWSS drinking water program, as well as the wetlands programs. One thing to note is that although the multi-purpose funding is not a continuing program, we will continue to award it if Congress continues to appropriate money for it in the coming years. And really, the what we call the MPG, multi-purpose grant, is awarded to tribes who have approved TAS for regulatory programs. And the money is fairly flexible in how it can be spent. So definitely, we're keeping an eye out on it, and I hope that Congress continues to fund it. Next slide, please. So this is just a simple slide that provides the 3-year funding trend for each of the water programs over time. As you can see, the funding has been relatively stable over the past 3 years. And if the budget is passed as the president has proposed, there will be some modest increases for most of the programs, with a little bit more of a notable increase for the infrastructure tribal set-asides. Next, please. I also wanted to share what is currently being considered in Congress with respect to what's called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. And it's pretty substantial. The bill would allocate about 11.7 billion with a B dollars over a 5-year period to fund projects under the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. And that would mean that the tribal set-aside fundings, which account for 2% off the top of the SRF allocations, would be funded at about $234 million each, or about $47 million per year, which is pretty substantive. One interesting aspect of the infrastructure bill, and I mentioned this at our tribal leaders meeting this morning, is that if the bill is funded as is written, currently in the bill, there is a provision that would fully fund the sanitary deficiency system at the Indian Health Service, essentially paying for about $3.5 billion in projects over the 5-year period. That's pretty amazing if it were to come to pass. So, we're really recommending that tribes ensure that your infrastructure needs are accounted for in the SDS list if you haven't already, or if you're thinking about putting projects through, do it as soon as you can. Next slide, please. In addition, the bill creates 4 new programs to fund various projects like lead service line replacements, emerging contaminant monitoring, grants to small and disadvantaged communities, and additional technical assistance support to drinking water and clean water systems. We expect some level of allocation for these programs for tribes, but until the bill is fully final and agreed to, we won't know what those allocations would be until we look through the appropriations language. But we can pretty much expect that there will be an allocation for tribes. So as you probably know, Congress is still debating the size and the makeup of this bill. We are hopeful that there will be a resolution in the very near future. We are keeping our fingers crossed, but we're not holding our breath. But stay tuned for more. Next slide, please. Well, yesterday, for those of you who were at the RTOC, Ellen Blake, our Assistant Director for our Surface Water Branch, gave a very good presentation on the status of the Section 401 rule, the WOTUS, and the intent behind the Baseline Water Quality Standards rule for tribes. We are including that presentation in the packet of information that will be provided to all the participants, although it may already be up there, I'm not sure. So because of that, I'm not going to be repeating what Ellen said. I think she did it very eloquently. I will only provide a few highlights. If you can go to the next slide, please. The first is the Section 401 certification rule, which the agency enacted under the Trump administration and which became effective about a year ago, back in September. The rule was very unpopular with states and tribes. I'm just putting it out there like it is. Given some of the provisions which severely limited tribal and state authorities and roles, particularly with respect to an exceptionally narrow timeframe to review certification requests, and a much more narrow scope of the how and what type of conditions could be included in a water quality certification. Earlier this year, the agency went out for public comment on revising this rule and received over 3,000 comment letters seeking various improvements to the rule. The agency expects to come out with a draft 401 rule sometime in the spring or summer of 2022. The other big rule development effort has to do with, of course, the redefining the definition of what is a water of the U.S. As you may have heard yesterday at our talk with some of the representatives representing Tohono O'odham and a couple of other tribes, a recent Arizona District Court ruling essentially vacated and remanded the Navigable Waters Protection Rule back to EPA for reconsideration. And so in light of this order, EPA has halted full implementation of the Navigable Waters Protection Rule and are instead interpreting WOTUS consistent with the pre-2015 regulatory regime until we develop a new definition and it becomes the law of the land when that happens. But until then, the pre-2015 regulatory regime is in place and in force right now. You may have seen that the agency was already in the process of initiating what headquarters terms a two-step rulemaking. The first step being the repeal of the Navigable Water Protection Rule, and the second step being replacing that with a new definition of WOTUS. So, there are various events that will be scheduled across the country and here in the region to get input and comments on the new definition, including listening sessions and dialogue with tribes, I believe later in October. What I would suggest, if you're interested in much more detailed than what I just provided is to come to an information session that we're convening later today. In fact, right after this session, and also tomorrow at 2 p.m. All right, next slide, please. So the other rulemaking that's underway is what's called the Water Quality Baseline Standards for tribes. This proposed rule would establish baseline water quality standards for waters on Indian reservations that do not have approved water quality standards under the Clean Water Act, which is about 80% of the tribes across the country. The intent of this rule is to protect water quality for those tribal waters that currently do not have standards in place and that perhaps rely on protections from state water quality standards outside of the reservation boundaries, which may or may not be as protective as what tribes would want in their waters. So that's the intent of this rule. The agency does expect to issue some kind of draft rule sometime in the spring of 2022, maybe summer, and expects to convene additional opportunities for input, including tribal consultation, prior to finalizing that rule. Next slide, please. Well, first, I just want to say we're really happy and very pleased that we were able to award over $24 million to support about 26 tribal infrastructure projects here in Region 9 in the fiscal year 21, including, as I mentioned, we were able to leverage $2 million from the Border Water Infrastructure Program, specifically for border tribes. And really congratulations to the tribes who were able to benefit from these projects. We are working hard to advocate for more infrastructure funding in the coming years from headquarters, and I encourage you also to do what you can to advocate for additional funding with our headquarters offices and with your representatives from RTOC, NTOC, and anywhere you can. It does not hurt to advocate for more and to ask for more resources. We're certainly doing that internally within the agency. A couple of water infrastructure updates. First is that project proposals for the FY22 drinking water infrastructure funding are now being accepted through November 19th. More information is in the link on the slide. And if I could please ask somebody from my team to paste the link on the chat box. That way folks can have it available. That would be great. And so, as in prior years, the FY21 Clean Water Indian Set-Aside funding will be awarded to projects on the Indian Health Service Sanitation Deficiency System priority list. We are hosting an infrastructure funding session at this conference on October 21st from 10 to 11. I hope I got that right. With speakers from Indian Health Service Phoenix office, from HUD, from USDA Rural Development. So please come. Next, please. Oh no, let's stay on this slide. I almost forgot. The Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey. I did want to mention that as part of the national effort to do a survey of the needs, the infrastructure needs across the country, there is a survey that's conducted about every 4 years, although the last one was done 9 years ago, so we're really behind. But essentially, EPA works with states and tribes to estimate the infrastructure needs of drinking water systems for next 20 years. And so the survey then forms the basis for future drinking water SRF funding and tribal set-asides for the following 4 years. And so it's a super important effort. We did our best to try to get more tribal drinking water systems to be counted as part of this needs survey. The more needs that are identified, the better, and the likelihood of additional resources being allocated for tribal drinking water systems. So we do hope to complete this survey by December 10th. And as part of this process, which we're really kind of at the tail end of, we have already conducted 20 of the surveys and are kind of towards the tail end of completing the remaining 35. And if you are one of the 55 systems on our list, and by now you probably should know who you are, your tribal drinking water program manager should have contacted you with a request to verify your 20-year capital investment needs for your respective systems. And we will be taking that data and we'll be populating that to the national database. So a big thank you to those utilities who have already helped EPA populate the surveys, and thanks in advance for the remaining 35 that are helping us finish those up, the remaining 35. So hopefully this will mean more funding for future years. We'll keep our fingers crossed, and I hope that all of the needs are fully accounted for moving forward. Next slide, please. So the following drinking water topics will be discussed in more detail at the Tribal Drinking Water session on October 21st at 2 p.m. Hope I got that right too. But I wanted to briefly mention them here briefly. The first is the Pfas Sampling. Region 9 is offering a voluntary water sampling program for interested water systems to analyze for the presence of PFAS compounds in drinking water. The program will begin initial sampling in the next few weeks, and we will be discussing this in further detail at the Tribal Drinking Water session. We encourage you to contact your drinking water program manager if you'd like to participate. We will also be discussing resources available to tribes to support drought planning and response to drinking water supply shortages associated with drought impacts, including drought contingency planning, which is particularly important, as really this is the tool that would help tribes identify scenarios, objectives, managerial and technical actions, and potential response systems needed to prevent or better respond to a drought-related emergency or a situation where your wells are running dry. Need a drink. And finally, we'll be providing a summary of the requirements and training available to support the development of risk assessments and emergency response plans, which are required for water utilities under the American Water Infrastructure Act, or AWIA. Upcoming training will focus on how to develop and certify your water system's emergency response plan to meet the December 31st deadline for water systems with populations greater than 3,300 people. So more to come. And again, I encourage you to attend the drinking water session later in the conference agenda if you'd like to learn more about these 3 efforts plus more. Next slide, please. I always say that one of the most important things that we do at EPA is to ensure that we're building tribal capacity to take on water programs and to manage and oversee these programs by achieving treatment in a similar manner as a state. There are currently 114 tribes with Clean Water Act 106 authority, 105 tribes with 319 authority, 27 with Water Quality Standards and Certifications Authority, and 1 tribe, we know who that is, Navajo, with the authority for managing their drinking water program, the Public Water System Supervision Program. And so in addition to Rezagini Rancheria, which we were really happy to hear about earlier today. We also wanted to give a huge shout out and congratulations to the Table Mountain Rancheria and La Posta Band for achieving TAS authority for water quality standards and certifications in fiscal year 21. Congratulations to you. We cheer for you. We're rooting for you, and please call on us if there's anything we can do to support you as you have taken on this new responsibility. In the coming year, we do expect to complete a review of at least 5 additional TAS applications that we have in-house for water quality standards, including Chemehuevi, La Jolla Band, Salt River, Yurok, and an expansion of Havasupai coverage. And we probably are expecting 1 or 2 more tribes that are going to be coming in for 106 and 319 grant authority as well. So we are doing everything we can to support tribes that are interested in acquiring TAS for these programs. So if you're interested to learn more about the Clean Water Act Water Quality Standards TAS application process and what goes into all that, we are holding a breakout session tomorrow at 9 a.m. So please come if you're interested for more information. Next slide, please. All right, finally, before we open it up for questions, I am almost done. I'd like to close with a plug for the upcoming non-point source workshop, which is tentatively scheduled for July 22nd of the coming year. Yeah, that's, gosh, 8 months from now. And so put it on your calendar. I also wanted to list out the upcoming breakout sessions that are happening later today, tomorrow, and Thursday on various important topics, all water related, of course. And encourage you to come, encourage you to ask questions. You know, my team is often ready and willing to answer any and all questions. And if we don't have the answers, we can get you an answer. So don't hesitate. And next slide, please. I do want to close by, thanking you for coming to the water session. Like I said, various team members from my division are here in case I get stuck to save me, in case there are some tough questions or questions that I just don't have the answer to. So we're happy to open it up for any questions that you may have. And it is a little bit awkward that you can't, talk back by mic. I guess everything is handled through the chat. So feel free. And let's see if there are any. So I am just going to see if, I don't know if Danielle or anyone else was keeping track of the chat and if there were any questions. I'm going to try to scroll here too.
Hey, Tomás, no questions yet. Okay. But we did place the link in the chat box, one pager that goes over the rulemakings that you covered cool. During your presentation. And Heidi had a great suggestion of putting that in the water lounge chat. So I will do that after.
All right. Hope you know how to do that. Well, very good. We did have quite a healthy discussion at our talk. Chairman Mervyn is a really good chairperson, and he makes sure that he gets the good questions asked and answered. And so, a lot of it had to do with the regulatory development that's underway by our headquarters Office of Water, and making sure that tribal interests are sought after much before we begin those regulatory development efforts, and making sure that we consult and we engage with tribes from the very beginning, even before we start, but definitely through the process and afterwards as well, which we completely agree with and will be passing along those sentiments and comments to our headquarters. In some respects, some of these processes are already underway, but it is a new administration. I think they mean well, and I think they want to demonstrate that they're serious about getting change underway. And it is a learning process as well for them.
So, Tomás, we have a question from Mervin, and it is, how does EPA view the process of the repeal rulemaking proceeding, even though the court vacated that rule?
Mervin, you always have the good questions, don't you? Well, I don't know what headquarters' position is, but I have heard that one of the reasons that even though the district court vacated the rule, there is some question as to whether a district court can put a halt on a rule across the entire country. So this was the district court, I think in New Mexico or Arizona or both. There is still a question whether the district courts have that authority to go beyond their local districts and put a vacant, basically to put a halt on a rule across the entire country. And so because there's that uncertainty and it may get appealed, I believe the agency wanted to make sure that this first step, which was step one in the two-step process, would continue as a backstop just in case that court ruling was appealed and for some reason was later determined to not be valid for other states beyond New Mexico and Arizona. And so because of that, I think they wanted to make sure that this first step to repeal the Navigable Water Protection Rule continued. And, it may be that in itself gets appealed as well. And so I think there would be at least some level of assurance that one of the two processes would prevail. And hopefully both will. But I think that was probably the main thinking behind proceeding with the repeal of the rulemaking through the step one process. Again, I am not in the inner circles, but that is sort of what I've been hearing, at least from within the agency, is that there's some backstop that we need to have just in case that the court rulings are deemed are appealed and then maybe perhaps later deemed inappropriate. So, but excellent question. Let's see, there's another question.
Yes, Mervin followed up with the Ninth Circuit the Ninth Circuit ruled on the reserved right for groundwater for agua caliente. Is this the same situation?
Goodness, Mervin. I'm not sure. I'd ask if Ellen or if any of our regional council folks, I'm not sure if they would be on the line, but if they are, if they want to chime in, I mean, we can certainly, follow up, but I don't know the answer to that one.
I am on. I'm not familiar with that case. I just quickly Googled it. But I think Tomás, what Tomás was trying to say is, I think the backstop of headquarters of doing the step one rule was so that in case the Ninth Circuit were to say that a district court doesn't have the ability to stop a national rule from taking effect across the country, we'd have a backstop. I think that the groundwater for that specific tribe is a different situation, but I can do a little bit more poking around to see what I can find.
Thanks, Ellen. I think tomorrow we're going to be talking about funding across all of the different AA ships or national program offices, and what are those formulas that go into the tribal allocations, and if you're interested in knowing more about those, please come. It should be a pretty good discussion. We certainly are advocating that to the extent that we are focusing on establishing better equity across the board, that those formulas be relooked at and reconsidered, and ideally increased and changed to benefit tribes, because we do know how under-resourced many of you are with all the programs. But particularly as you're acquiring TAS for more programs and you're not getting more funding for those, it becomes very challenging. And so we realize that. And particularly as tribes are considering TAS for water quality standards, it is a much higher level and a lot more rigorous to then have TAS for water quality standards, because it does require more resources and more staff, and if we're not providing more as you're acquiring those, it does become very challenging for you. So we get that. And we're certainly messaging that to our headquarters offices. And this is a window of opportunity, let me just say. Time will tell, how the administration reacts and changes things, but they certainly have come in with an eager willingness to make change for the better. So we are trying our best to take advantage of those opportunities and windows of opportunity. So just know that we're working on that. And yes, the funding roundtable is tomorrow at 1. Thank you, Loretta. We are posting this presentation as well as Ellen's presentation and probably the funding presentation on the various, I forgot what they're called, the posting boards where we put all of the presentations. So don't worry if you didn't capture a lot of it. You'll have access to the presentations. One other thing, if you can at some point, we're always looking for feedback on the content that we provide you through these sessions. And so particularly this one, because I realize it's not very detailed in many ways. It's very much a very brief snapshot of various different types of topics. I'm always interested to get feedback on whether this format works for you, if it's the right level of detail, because we really can spend many hours or days on some of these topics, and that's why there's those breakout sessions. And so this becomes almost just a briefer of what's to come in many ways. So let us know if there's something else that you want to see from these more general division presentations. We'd appreciate it. And we'll give you, I'm buying time. I don't know if you've noticed that, to see if there's anyone that wants to submit any questions, but we'll be available through the entire tribal conference in case you want to pull any of us aside and want to have a conversation about a specific topic. We're always available. And I think with that, and I'm sorry that you can't talk. I guess under this platform you're not able to talk, and you're relegated to a chat box. So Anyway, with that, I think maybe I will conclude the session and thank everybody for coming. And we're always interested in what feedback you have for us as well. So don't hesitate to provide that. Okay.
Tomás, if I can just interrupt, we do have one more question that just came in. Jennifer Smith was wanting to know how long it takes the EPA to approve tribal water standards, which can be a huge discussion.
Okay. All right. Well, good thing I have Ellen and maybe Tina on the phone. If you guys want to take a crack at that.
Sure. I guess, are we talking about approval of a submitted standards package, or are we talking about a TAS application? So I'm going to address the question as if we're talking about a water quality standards package after a tribe has received TAS. And so the statute gives us 60 days to approve and 90 days to disapprove. We do our level best to try and get it done within 60 days. Usually we've been doing a lot of work with the tribe in advance of receiving the actual submittal of the package. So we know what to expect, where we might have some sticking points. One of the things that we do have to do once those packages come in is Endangered Species Act consultation with Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries Service. So that can also take some time depending on their staffing, but we really try to get it done within 60 days. So hopefully that answered your question.
What if the question was, how long does EPA take to review and approve a TAS package for water quality standards and certifications? How long does it typically take us? And yeah, it depends on if we have to ask for more information, but let's say we have all the data we need. How long does it take us to review and approve a TAS package for water quality standards and certifications?
So this is Danielle, and Jason had put in the chat, ideally it would take under 9 months. We may have seen it go longer. It just depends on the the fee lands that are on the reservation and making sure that we have all of the important components to a TAS application, but we try to process it under 9 months.
Great. And we do want to encourage tribes to consider submitting TAS for water quality standards. Like I said, it is a higher bar. It does require, more of your resources. But on the other hand, it gives you the authority to set water quality standards on tribal lands, on your reservations. And whether they're more stringent than the state standards, you get to assess that and determine that. One of the goals that the new administration has set, and we're not sure of the genesis of the number, but they would like to have 100 tribes have TAS for water quality standards and certifications. I mean, I'm not sure that 100 was, just a random number, but, I think they were thinking we'd like to double that if tribes choose to, pursue TAS for standards. We would do everything we can to support them. But it just gives you a little bit of a brief preview of the level of willingness of the administration to support tribes who want to get TAS to do so. And we certainly are very supportive and are here to support you in case you would like to pursue that as well. And yes, we have a TAS breakout tomorrow at 9. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and we appreciate you. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference, and definitely participate in the water breakout sessions later today and tomorrow and Thursday. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, team, for participating, and we will see you later. Thanks.